When you think of a king, what comes to mind? Perhaps you imagine a noble ruler, a man of power and grace, dressed in fine silks and radiating authority. You might picture grand castles, elegant balls, a court filled with polished and sophisticated individuals. This is the image that history often paints for us, a romanticized version of royalty. But I am here today to shatter that illusion completely. We are going to delve into the life of a king who was anything but noble. A monarch whose legacy is not one of grandeur but of sheer, unadulterated grotesqueness. We are talking about King Henry VIII of England. The real Henry was a monster. He was a man driven by gluttony, lust, and a terrifying paranoia that consumed everyone around him. This is not a story of a great king. It is the story of a tyrant's descent into madness and physical decay. We will explore the revolting details of his daily life, from the food he shoveled into his mouth to the stench that emanated from his very body. This is a tale of a king who was not just metaphorically rotten to the core, but literally rotted while he was still alive. A man whose cruelty knew no bounds and whose personal hygiene was practically non-existent. The glamour of his reign is a lie, a carefully constructed facade to hide the disgusting truth lurking beneath the surface. In the coming minutes, we will peel back the layers of this historical horror story. We will journey into the royal kitchens, where feasts of unimaginable scale were prepared. Imagine mountains of greasy meat, roasted birds with feathers still on, vats of ale consumed in a single sitting. We will uncover Henry's disgusting eating habits, tearing at food with greasy hands, spilling and slobbering without a care. From the filth of his dining table to the filth of his body, royal sweat, infrequent bathing, heavy perfumes used to mask a knock-you-over stench. Then, the darkest corners of his heart, his twisted love life. He treated these women cruelly as objects for pleasure and political gain, pawns in his game, discarded with terrifying brutality. Finally, the gruesome end, his slow, agonizing decay, rotting from the inside out, festering, pus-filled ulcers on his legs, wounds so foul their stench reached other rooms. This is a story you weren't taught in school, and one you'll never forget. King Henry VIII's appetite was legendary. It was not just an appetite, it was a monstrous, gaping maw that could never be satisfied. His kitchens were not places of culinary art. They were factories of flesh, churning out an endless river of roasted animals, boiled animals, baked animals. Every single day, the fires in the Hampton Court kitchens roared, consuming 6 tons of oak wood just to cook his meals. 1,300 animals were slaughtered and cooked every year just for Henry's court: oxen, sheep, deer. This was not about nourishment, it was a display of power. A typical meal for Henry was not a plate, but a parade of dishes. Course after course would be laid before him. Roasted swans with feathers put back on for presentation, peacocks skinned, roasted, and sewn back into their iridescent plumage. Whole boars brought to the table, their heads still attached, an apple stuffed in their mouths. And the meat just kept coming. Venison pasties, so large they had to be carried by multiple servants. Henry didn't just eat a lot, he ate things that would turn our modern stomachs inside out. Grilled beaver tails, whale meat, porpoise, seal. Internal organs were a particular favorite, and everything was heavily spiced, not necessarily for flavor, but to mask the taste of meat that was often beginning to spoil. The spices were another way for Henry to flaunt his immense wealth while he shoveled borderline rotten food into his face. And to wash it all down, not water. Henry drank gallons of ale and strong sweet wine with every meal. It is estimated that he and his court consumed around 600,000 gallons of ale per year. That is enough to fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool. This constant consumption of rich, fatty foods and vast quantities of alcohol had a predictable effect. He ballooned in size, his waistline expanding to a shocking 54 inches. He became a bloated, obese tyrant, his body a prisoner of his own disgusting appetite. The way Henry ate was just as revolting as what he ate. Forget any image you have of a king dining with delicate manners. Henry's court was a place of primal, messy consumption. He would plunge his fingers deep into pies, scoop out the filling, and smear it across his face as he ate. Juice and grease would drip down his chin, staining his lavish, jewel-encrusted doublets. He would often gnaw on bones, suck out the marrow, and throw the bones to dogs that swarmed his feet. The floor of the great hall was covered in rushes, but these were not changed regularly. They became a disgusting carpet of filth, soaking up spilled ale, discarded food, animal waste, and human spit. The stench must have been overpowering. Henry and his courtiers would wipe their greasy hands on their sleeves, on the tablecloths, on the backs of the servants. This behavior set the tone for the entire court. If the king was a slob, then everyone could be a slob. If you thought his eating habits were bad, let's talk about his personal hygiene. He believed water could let in diseases, so he avoided full baths for months, sometimes even years on end. Instead, he would have servants wipe him down with a cloth scented with rose water. He wore the same linen undershirt for days, sometimes weeks. The shirt became saturated with sweat, grease, and dead skin cells. The king was caked in his own filth. Courtiers smelled him before they saw him. Stale sweat, unwashed body odors, and his rich, greasy diet combined into a notoriously potent smell. The filth was all around him. His private toilet, the close stool, was a servant's job to empty and to wipe the king's bottom. The room would have reeked of human waste. The royal palaces were crawling with vermin. Rats, lice, and fleas infested the bedding, the clothes, and the people themselves. Henry would have been constantly itching. Henry's appetite for food was matched only by his monstrous appetite for women. His first wife, Catherine of Aragon, experienced this cruelty. She failed to give him a son, and he grew tired of her, his eyes wandering to younger prospects. He cast her aside, separated her from her daughter, and exiled her. When Catherine died, Henry's reaction was not one of sorrow. Instead, he celebrated. It was a final, disgusting act of disrespect. The reason for Catherine's downfall was Anne Boleyn. His lust for her drove him to tear his kingdom apart. He severed England's ties with Rome, declared himself supreme head of the Church of England, and destroyed monasteries. Once he had her, the fantasy curdled. She'd promised a son, and failed. Infatuation turned to bitter disappointment, then hatred. In his twisted mind, she'd tricked him. She had to be punished severely. He and his cronies concocted fabricated charges of adultery, incest, and witchcraft. After 7 years of pursuit and 3 years of marriage, he sent her to her death. The day after Anne's execution, he was betrothed to Jane Seymour, who died after giving him a son. He rejected Anne of Cleves as ugly. He executed the young Catherine Howard for adultery. His final wife, Catherine Parr, acted more as nursemaid than spouse, and outlived the tyrant. As Henry grew older, fatter, and sicker, his mind began to darken. His court transformed into a nest of fear and suspicion. He saw enemies everywhere. The Tower of London became infamous as a chamber of horrors where the king's will was imposed through unimaginable pain. One of the most feared instruments was the rack, designed to dislocate every joint. Another disgusting device was the scavenger's daughter, which compressed the victim's body, forcing blood from their nose and ears. The most horrific sentence was to be hanged, drawn, and quartered. The victim was hanged, cut down alive, disemboweled, and then beheaded and chopped into 4 pieces. Even beheading was often a botched and bloody affair. The elderly Countess of Salisbury refused to place her head on the block and was chased around the scaffold by the executioner, who hacked at her until she was dead. In his final years, Henry's body began to fail him. His weight ballooned to an estimated 400 pounds. He was so enormous that he could no longer walk unaided. The catalyst was a jousting accident that reopened a severe leg wound. It festered, developing into chronic varicose ulcers. The pain was constant and excruciating, a relentless agony that fueled his already fearsome temper. His servants had the most stomach-churning job. Twice a day they unwrapped the bandages to clean the weeping sores. They would have been confronted with the gruesome sight of raw, putrid flesh. The stench of gangrenous, decaying flesh could be smelled from 3 rooms away. The King of England smelled like a corpse, because, well, a part of him already was one. He was a prisoner in his own rotting flesh. Yet his diet did not change. He gorged himself on rich, fatty meats and sweet wines. It was a slow, deliberate form of suicide by gluttony. The end finally came on January the 28th, 1547. He was often delirious, ranting and screaming, his mind clouded by fever. By the time the archbishop arrived, the king could no longer speak. But the grotesqueness did not end with his death. Gases built up inside his massive, decaying corpse. During an overnight stop at Sion Abbey, the pressure became too much. The coffin burst open with a sickening crack, and putrid, decomposing fluids leaked onto the chapel floor. In the morning, servants found dogs licking up the foul leakage from the floorboards. So we come to the end of our journey. We have peeled back the layers of royal propaganda to reveal the grotesque reality beneath. This was a monarch of monstrosity. His story is a stark reminder that a crown does not bestow grace. It can simply provide a golden stage for a monster to perform. The physical rot that consumed him was merely the outward manifestation of the moral rot that had been festering within him for decades. His legacy is written in the blood and suffering of his countless victims. It is in the memory of his wives, and in the screams of the tortured in the Tower of London. He is memorable not because he was great, but because he was so profoundly and unforgettably monstrous. He remains the undisputed king of disgust, a title no other monarch has ever come close to claiming.